I'm joined now by John Roome from New York. He's the Senior Director for Climate Change at the World Bank. And I want you to I want you to talk, if you will, about the change in direction at the World Bank. You've got a new climate action plan, which I guess really puts more of an emphasis on rebalancing your work to help countries adapting to climate change.
One of the major elements of our new climate action plan is to recognize that poverty alleviation and climate go hand in hand. If we don't take action soon to mitigate the impact of climate change on people, we'll probably see 100 million more people living in poverty by the year 2030. And in addition, if we can't flatten emissions to keep global warming below 2 degrees, no amount of resilience and adaptation will help poor people. So focusing on bringing development and climate change together is a key part of our overall strategy in terms of alleviating poverty.
So what can the World Bank do to help these developing countries actually hit their targets? It's going to take a considerable amount of investment, I would think.
Yeah, well, we're focusing on a number of key areas. One important one is on renewable energy, both through direct investments that we will make, but more importantly, helping countries put in place the right policy frameworks to attract private sector. The amount of private sector investment that will be needed in renewable energy will be huge. We've got technology on our side, we're seeing prices fall, but we also know that good policies, good bidding procedures that are transparent and reliable will result in falling prices. And so we will be looking to increase our financing for renewable energy and looking towards mobilizing private sector financing.
I read some of your work earlier this month, and I was kind of surprised at all the different facets of all of this, and I'm hoping maybe you can kind of elucidate one of them. I know that you're going to be working with cities dealing with an influx of people into urban areas. Flesh that one out for us.
So if you think by 2050, the world's likely to see 2 billion more people moving into cities. And so the challenge is, how do you provide services for those people, transport, housing, jobs, but at the same time reduce carbon emissions by focusing, for example, on compact cities, on more urban transport, but also improve resilience, particularly against floods. A number of Asian cities are very susceptible to flooding. And so thinking about where people live, how one builds drainage systems, how one ensures that canals are kept clean, all of these are important to put together cities that are both economically strong and deliver services and have low carbon emissions and are resilient to climate. A key part of this comes in the area of urban planning. A lot of these investments will have to take place over the next 15, 20, 30 years. So getting planning systems in place that these are taken into consideration from the beginning will be absolutely critical.
Flooding, let's talk about the flip side of that, because we've seen that as well. Drought, food, famine, also an issue. What do you do about that?
So you're right. In a number of places, we will see dramatic impacts from climate change on agriculture, 25% falls in productivity. Some of the things that we're working on, for example, in West Africa, we're working on developing new seeds that can be grown in a much shorter growing cycle so it can adapt. Second area we'll be focusing on, particularly of interest in Asia, would be on rice, to have rice that can deal with different lengths of growing period and different amounts of water, and focusing on irrigation. As rainfall patterns change, more extreme flooding, longer periods of no rain, putting in place irrigation systems that will store water and be able to adapt to these changing climates will be absolutely critical to ensure that production keeps going. And in many cases, this is an international issue. As you probably know, the Mekong Delta produces 25% of the rice that is sold on the world market. So ensuring that this can keep going, even if they're faced with increased typhoons, changing weather patterns, this is very important, not only for a country like Vietnam, for the global rice markets as well.
Yeah, John, I know you mentioned climate change threatens to drive about 100 million people more into poverty in the next 15 years. So give me your sense of what this day means to you, seeing all of these leaders of these countries stepping up, signing this agreement, basically saying, we're going to try and do something about this.
So I think we're very optimistic. If you think back to Paris, was where the negotiators did their job. They came together and they reached this truly historic agreement, which gives us hope. Here in New York today, the leaders stood up and they signed. They said, we're on board, we're moving forward. That's great, that's excellent. We have a platform now to move. But it's not done yet. I think everybody can take the weekend to celebrate, take a short rest, but Monday morning we need to get back to work to focus on implementation, implementation, implementation. It's going to take a lot of hard work by a large number of people in a large number of areas, and so focusing on getting that renewable energy out there, putting early warning systems in place, developing climate smart agriculture, putting better water management systems in place, putting a deeper price on carbon, all of these things are very important and will require a large number of people to come together focusing on implementation. But we shouldn't forget and take a little bit of time to celebrate what did happen here in New York today, built on the success of Paris.
All right, John, thanks so much for joining us from New York. Really appreciate it.